Reflections on living with Kundalini Awakening, the integration process. It is July 19th, 2026. About 4 years since I did one of these videos. I just watched some of it back. Just really noticing the spiralic nature of this journey of moving in spirals. You might have noticed this when you feel like you've been through something. It's like, oh yeah, I got this. And then it comes back around. But it's different. You're in a different place. It's a different depth. It's a different thing, right? Um, what I'm noticing now, like the last 4 years, so interesting. Like after I did that video, I definitely went back into the darkness around a whole bunch of stuff. There was a lot of shame. I went through a period of meeting a lot of shame in the body that needed to be digested. And what's really striking me now about where I'm at is that any sense of, yeah, when I heal this, then, when I heal this, then has really just gone. There's just a sense of like, oh, I have way more range as a human to feel both the depths of the darkness and the highs of the light, you could say. And it's not about being able to stay in the light or anything like that, but rather recognizing that I am that which holds it all. I am that which holds it all, right? And so sometimes there's the dark, sometimes there's the light, and coming into neutrality. That's really striking me lately. A teaching that I've received from one of my tantric teachers, bless her, of neutrality, of just being completely neutral in relationship to what is arising in the darkness, stuff arising, shame arising, grief arising, whatever. Can I be neutral with it? Bliss arising, epicness arising. Can I be neutral with that too? Um, so there's a felt sense. The last 4 years has been so much about recognizing or understanding the nature of lineage and the nature of transmission, the nature of the collective field or the Shakti field, the field of Shakti, and the recognition of the importance of knowing oneself beyond the individual sense of self, the recognition on a really deeply experiential sense of not being a contracted individual, but rather being a conditional expression. What the fuck does that mean? I'll give you an example. So I was recently at the Heart of Tantra festival, very beautifully held, intimate little festival here in BC. If you're interested in Tantra, if you're interested in awakening and liberation, definitely get along to it next year. And we were doing what is called transfiguration, which is more of a neo-tantric practice. There was a lot of neo-tantra at this festival. And it was really beautiful to really dive into some of these neo-tantra practices, because I've been so focused on classical tantra, the study, practice, and embodiment of those teachings. And so coming into the neo-tantric practices with an open heart and an open mind, like not thinking I know what they're about, not rejecting them, right? There's all this subtle stuff, like, no, open to this as well. This too is the goddess. We think about the recognition sutras, I think it's Sutra 8, that all the philosophical views are the goddess as well. And this teaching has been very prevalent for me in the last little while. Actually, the whole recognition sutra has guided me profoundly for the last couple of years. And this happens on the path, right? Is that at certain points, you will find particular texts that meet you where you are and give you the teaching for right now. And I highly, highly encourage you not just to read over these texts, but rather to choose to embody the teachings. What is the teaching that this text is giving you? And how do you live into the embodiment of that text? And for me, the last little while, it's been the Recognition Sutras, working with Christopher Wallace's translation. Um, anyway, so yeah, Sutra 8 is the recognition that all the philosophical views of reality, all of the humans, they're all Shakti too, right? So I'm at the Heart of Tantra festival and I am participating in Transfiguration, which we were doing as there was an inner circle and an outer circle, and it was eye gazing for 2 minutes. And there was mostly men on the outer circle, mostly women on the inner circle. So it meant that I got to eye gaze with, I think it was about 12 different men. And that was an absolutely extraordinary perspective. Side note on this, I did work with a Tantra teacher briefly who was very disparaging or dismissive about eye gazing as a neo-tantric practice, because from his perspective as a classical Tantra teacher, when we eye gaze for somebody for a period of time, we begin to merge with them and we begin to take on their karma. And that's a very important thing to be aware of, is that we need to respect the inherent power of these practices. You can't have it both ways. You can't be like, oh, these practices are amazing and really powerful, but not recognize the responsibility or the consequences of engaging with powerful practices. And so I was aware of this going in, but it was only 2 minutes of eye gazing. And I just had this felt sense that once we get over 5 minutes, then there starts to be more merging of, and potentially the taking on of karma. I'm really aware as a tantrika, like I practice brahmacharya, which is right relationship to sexual energy, because I'm very aware if I was to casually get involved with someone sexually, there is no casual for me. There's only full bonding of the heart body mind complex, which does lead to like this merging of the energetic fields, which leads to taking on of the karma. And I've learned this the hard way of what can happen if I do this, and the burning out that's required to meet that. Anyway, back to the Heart of Tantra Festival and Transfiguration. 2 minutes felt good. So going along, and this is what coming to my point, that we are not a separate, fixed entity or individual in the way that we think we are. And this has really dropped in for me in the last couple of years, right? Is the recognition of self as awareness and energy as the expression of Shakti, and how that manifests and what that means to no longer cling to self-images, and the liberation that begins to unfold as one is willing to let self-images burn. And this is an important piece to understand on the journey of Kundalini Awakening, because a lot of the suffering that you might be experiencing is related to your clinging or your attachment to self-image. And if you can begin to see that and to recognize, oh shit, I need to burn up or dissolve the attachment to the self-image. All right, so back to the Heart of Tantra Festival Transfiguration. As I was sitting in front of each man, dropping into awareness as deeply as possible, letting the heart be open. And I was working with open eye meditation, allowing myself to receive the entire visual field. And I began to notice that different aspects of me would arise in relationship to the man in front of me. And it was like, oh, this is really interesting to see that who I am is conditional. Like, we are conditional beings. When we're in our family of origin, we go home for the weekend, the version of us that suddenly comes through will be different from the version of us that might show up when we're out at a rave with our friends, for example. And both legit and real, they're just different aspects of our beingness, right? And so in this 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, I got to feel the way in which different men and how they are, their expression would speak to different expressions within me. And it was really cool and amazing and incredible to have that direct experience of this. And there was also such a felt sense of connection. Like, some of these humans I didn't even exchange any words with. And this is on the Saturday night before we did our dance party. And before, we had a full day Sunday, there was temple night on Sunday night, and then Monday night we left. So I noticed that those humans, I just felt this instant affinity connection with, because we'd eye gazed for 2 minutes. Yeah, so what I'm noticing, like 4 years on from the last video that I did like this, is that there's both been way more intensity, way more intensity in my ability to stay in the ground of being, to know myself as awareness, to really open to the joy of awareness, even when a lot of shame has been arising, or a lot of grief has been arising, or I've had a lot of external material challenges. The last 4 years, I've immigrated to Canada with my son and been facing a lot of challenges with my business and all kinds of things. And just really noticing how the way I orientate to these is through the lens of awakening and liberation. Like, it's not just about fixing the external so I have a different experience. What it's been is the recognition of the experience that's arising within me appears to being caused by the external conditionings, right? But really, the experience that's arising isn't, it's being caused by my beliefs, by my attachment, by my aversions. And it's been really, really deep work because, on a material level, I've hit the wall in a way that I've not hit the wall in a long time. And, I'm providing for a child. Well, he's not a child, he's 16 now. And just really having to discover what it actually means on the deepest felt sense to trust life, and like you see, what to trust the goddess, and still showing up and taking action, but from a place of deep, deep trust, deep trust, which is very different from showing up and taking action from a survival, grasping, urgency, holy shit, I have to do something, where's rent coming from? Did it, like, from that place? And so this time period has been like an initiation into, can you relax back and trust now? Can you relax back and trust now? Can you relax back and trust now? And what I've realized so deeply in the last little while is that when I'm grasping, right, which can look like being productive, it can look like being ambitious, it can look like taking action, but when I'm in that, it creates like a barrier between me and life, and there's no space, there's no openness, right, for me to fully receive, to open to receive what life has to offer. And so there's a recognition of this catch 22 where that deep survival creates this way of being which prevents receiving the gifts of life that moves one out of survival. And so it's like, oh shit, what comes first, right? Do we attain the physical material things first that allow us to relax? Or do we relax, which allows us to receive the bounty of life that's always on offer to us? And in the last, few weeks, as I've deeply been working with this, I just led a Joy Rebel Tantra training, Recognize and Radiate. And the journey over the 7 weeks, it's soften, surrender, open, receive, flower, express, and radiate. And leading this journey, it's both an embodiment journey, there's embodiment practices, and then there's also the teachings. I'm going through it as well. And this is when I went to Heart of Tantra too, was when I was right in I was in the receiving and expression phase and coming into the expression phase. And like, wow, the place it took me, it was deep. I had a lot of heart stuff, grief, and there was a recognition of like, oh, wow, the heart has been walled off, which has prevented me from opening to receive the bounty of life. And as that grief was met, like I'm literally at the Heart of Tantra. Naomi was leading this beautiful, beautiful workshop on the Saturday afternoon, and I'm just on my hands and knees, bowing to the goddess in tears. I was just in tears, and what was coming through was this profound gratitude that I get to do this. I get to immerse in practice and immerse in teachings and share it with other humans. I had my presentation at the festival on the Sunday morning, and there was just such a felt sense of gratitude that I get to do this. Thank you. And I've noticed that since that grief, that melting of the wall, that opening to gratitude, that opening to the blessings of being able to see and feel the preciousness of the unfolding of the path, even though, or especially, that it's been so difficult. Since then, all kinds of opportunities have started flowing in. Like, I've been offered a long-term apartment here in Nelson. I've been doing short-term back-to-back since we got here, 4 short terms in a year, and the price has been higher, and now 25% less rent, and it's permanent, it's long term. And it was just offered to me. I wasn't even looking for a place because I just signed another short-term lease. And this is what I mean. Like, this is the thing with Kundalini Awakening that I've noticed, is that whatever's unfolding for us in terms of, our grasping or our avoidance, the samskaras, the undigested emotional experiences, the vikalpa, the beliefs, or the behavior patterns, all of it gets amplified once Kundalini awakens and the energy begins to flow. It's all amplified. So both the most difficult gets amplified and the bliss can get amplified as well. And so again, like I say, being able to hold it all is really, really important. Where was I going with that? The amplification. Yeah, I just want to acknowledge how challenging it can be once Kundalini awakens. And that, what I see over and over, like I've been making these videos now since I think 2018 might have been my first one on living with Kundalini Awakening. And just seeing, like, if you go back and watch those early ones, you will see and feel the difference in who I be, right? Because again, we're not a fixed, separate individual. And as we alchemize or digest the patterns and the samskaras, the vikalpas, the karmic knots, the granthis, as all of this begins to purify, right? Because in essence, once Kundalini awakens, we're stepping into the purification process. As it all begins to purify, and we begin to learn to surrender into her, to surrender into that, we begin to know ourselves. To know ourselves is the joy of awareness. How we look, how we feel, how we show up changes dramatically. And as we change, the world around, it's like the world begins to arrange itself around us in a different way. Like, this existence is extraordinary. So, right, just to wrap up, some of you may have just started going through Kundalini Awakening. For some of you, it may have been years. For some of you, it may have been decades. Some people are reaching out to me, have been going through it for decades and are still in the hard stuff. And I know that you hear this all the time, but surrender is the way. Surrender is the way. But actual, whole-bodied, on your knees, in prostration, surrendering to the goddess. In some ways, you can't even do that. In some ways, surrender arising is grace itself. What you can do is you can pray for surrender. Goddess, give me the strength to be able to surrender to your wisdom. Goddess, give me the strength to be able to surrender to this path. Goddess, give me the strength to be able to surrender to what is asked of me. Right? And your sincerity in that prayer will have benefits. And to do this, you need to let go of your ideas of what surrender is, right? Because the mind has an idea of what it thinks surrender means, and it generates thoughts, beliefs, narratives that prevent us from getting really curious and just opening up to it. And I know for the last few years, that's what's been asked of me, is surrender on the deepest level. It just continues on. And depending on when you're watching this, the Tantra for Turbulent Times Summit is coming up at the end of July 2026, and I'm delivering a presentation on Stop Fighting Reality, the radical tantric practice of surrender. So if you're experiencing Kundalini Awakening, highly suggest that you watch that presentation. The summit's free. I'll drop a link below. And if it's after that time, it will be recorded, and maybe I'll drop a link below once it's up somewhere else. So yeah, if I was to summarize the last 4 years since I did this, oh my goodness, wow, I have been humbled, and I'm learning, still learning. I'm learning to rest back, let myself be held by the lineage, let myself be held by the goddess, let myself be held by the teachings, learning to rest in that and to move from that place, And blessings on your path, blessings on the awakening that you're going through. May you know yourself as the joy of awareness. May you know yourself as that. Mm.